Let's get your names, okay. Got it. Have you been-
I can't see the timer.
You can't?
Okay, I see it now. Hello, my name is Julio. I'm here to talk about how we should repeal Proposition 63. My main points of argument today are that Proposition 63 harms the courts because it puts an unnecessary burden on them. How the proposition puts more harm on law-abiding citizens than it does criminals. And how it puts law-owning Californians at risk. First, a quick overview of what Proposition 63 says. This is a quick summary that was on the ballot. Requires background check and Department of Justice authorization to purchase ammunition, prohibits possession of large capacity ammunition, magazines, establishes procedures for enforcing laws prohibiting firearm possession by specified persons, requires Department of Justice's participation in federal, national, and state criminal background checks. For my first point, how this proposition harms the courts. From what I read off, a lot of these procedures have to go through the courts in some form of either having to report to them and then having all of that process be filed. The problem here is that ever since the Great Recession of 2008, the courts have been having budget cuts and have been losing funding, which has caused them, according to their website, to have reduced services, and this in turn has caused what is now longer lines, closing several courthouses down, and other barriers of that nature. According to CJC, it estimates that more than 2 million Californians have lost access to justice in their communities because of all the closing down and all their courthouses losing funding and resources. This, according to Martin Hoshino, the director of the CJC, he states that the closures have created physical barriers to access. There are longer lines, shorter hours, and longer distances between courts. Not everybody has the means to take that kind of time off, and they may not even have the transportation means. What I'm arguing here is that this law should not put all the burden on the courts, since the courts have to be fixed in the first place, or at least well managed to begin with. My second point is that the proposition puts more harm on law-abiding citizens than it does criminals. This law was supposed to crack down on what is known as straw purchasing. Straw purchasing is when someone who qualifies to own a gun and buys the gun and then gives it to someone who was not qualified to have it in the first place. This in turn is a way around the system. According to a national survey, it estimates that about 10% of youthful age 18 to 40 male respondents who admitted to having a gun at the time of their arrest had obtained it from a gun store. The other 90% obtained them through a variety of off-the-book means, for example, as gifts or sharing arrangements with fellow gang members. According to Philip Cook, a professor of public policy studies at Duke University, he states, the first retail sale was most likely legal in that the clerk followed federal and state requirements for documentation, of background check, and record keeping. From here, we see that while we do have laws in place, we see that adding more of the same laws without some kind of enforcement does nothing, since criminals will break the law. And now we're just pouring in more resources while inconveniencing law-abiding citizens, since, as we saw earlier, the courts are just a mess right now, and then criminals will just break the law and don't have to deal with any of that. My third point is that gun owners would be put at risk because of this proposition. According to the Cato Institute, they did a policy analysis on the costs and consequences of gun control. They found that although one can quickly change magazines, persons being attacked by criminals will typically prefer not to spend even a few seconds for a magazine change. The stress of being attacked usually impedes fine motor skills, making it much more difficult to insert the magazine. From the research I did, people's motor skills tend to degrade at around 145 beats per minute. That kind of heart rate is attained in usually any kind of flight or fight kind of situations, causing people's fine motor skills to degrade. Fine motor skills is defined as the use of small muscles, more commonly known as the toes, hands, and tongue. But the most important one are the hands and wrists, where fumbling can happen. People can become lax and not have as good as accuracy as they could. Having smaller clips would make every bullet count much more since they have more to lose. My next point, banning a higher capacity magazine does not affect criminals as much as one would expect. In the same consequence policy analysis, they state that advocates of a ban in standard capacity magazine assert that while the attacker is changing the magazine, an intended victim might be able to subdue him, yet they cannot point to a single instance where this actually happened. They cite a trilogy of events that happened in Tusco, Arizona, Aurora, Colorado, and Newtown, Connecticut. In fact, all those events involved gun jams, not magazine changes. As I stated earlier, that in this policy analysis, that while changing a magazine can be quick, it can be quick and easy, that it is quick and easy, so while lowering the magazine count really does nothing in terms of actual amount of damage, since the perpetrator would have had probably training and practice and would have used the gun no matter what in terms of how well prepared he was, even if he could have more, say, ammunition on hand instead of just the one clip. Lastly, people do use gun in self-defense more than people actually give it credit for. Back when Barack Obama was president, he had the Institute of Medicine and National Research Council do a study on how gun violence happens and what can we do about it. The research found that defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive uses by criminals, which basically kind of gives at least the counter notion that that self-defense is a rarity, even though homicidal attacks are, say, higher. And that is it.